Very nice to be here. Appreciate the invitation. I always like talking about the jhanas. Um, Very interesting topic. So, what I'm going to do is just share with you today the basic instructions for how to enter the jhanas as I teach them. I learned them from Ayakema. Actually, I stumbled into the first one when I was on a retreat with uh, Ajahn Buddhadasa in southern Thailand. I didn't know it was a jhana. They told me I was experiencing piti. I knew I liked it. It did change my practice from it's something I know I should do to I want to do this. Uh, just the pleasure of it was, well, I'm a greed type, so yeah, okay, here's a nice source of pleasure. So the jhanas are 8 altered states of consciousness. Actually, in the suttas, there's 4 jhanas and 4 immaterial states. And it's not until much later that they're referred to as the 8th jhanas. That's convenient if you want to talk about the 4 immaterial states and the 4 jhanas at the same time. You just say the 8 jhanas, but definitely different in the suttas. Although we do certainly find many suttas where there are the first 4 jhanas and then 3 or 4 of the immaterial states. So it's a pattern that makes a whole lot of sense. So as I think probably most of you know, the Buddha's teachings are primarily in 3 categories: sila, samadhi, panya, ethics, morality, keeping the precepts. Samadhi is usually translated as concentration. I actually prefer indistractability. Concentration's got that furrowed brow thing, which, yeah, people try too hard and it doesn't work. Um, yeah, that's a problem with teaching jhanas. I tell students at the beginning of a retreat, I give them 2 warnings. The first one is if you have expectations, you're in trouble. Expectations is the worst thing to bring on any retreat. All that you can really expect is that it will be different from what you expect. So, all right. And for jhanas, though, it really gets in the way because an expectation is wanting. Wanting is the first hindrance. And over again, the Buddha talks about the abandoning of the hindrances being a prerequisite for entering the jhanas. The other warning is that, yeah, if you start fooling with concentration and you have any unresolved issues, they might come up. Hopefully, none of you have any unresolved psychological issues, but I have to put that out there because, yeah, seems to be a problem for humans. And then panya is wisdom. And basically, what the Buddha is saying is clean up your act, learn to concentrate your mind, and use your concentrated, indistractable mind to investigate reality and understand what's actually happening. So that's the context. The jhanas in the suttas frequently are preceded by the abandoning of the hindrances. This is what's necessary. You might notice when you're meditating and you get distracted that pretty much all the time you could label the distraction with one of the 5 hindrances. You want something, you don't want something, your energy is too low, or you're lazy, or whatever, or you're got too much energy. There's possibility of remorse, thinking about something that happened in the past you wish didn't happen, or doubt or uncertainty. Um, but what's really necessary to enter the jhanas is to get a mind that's relatively quiet. So in the suttas, it talks about the abandoning of the hindrances. In later Pali literature, it talks about access concentration. So I've adopted the phrase access concentration to describe what you've got to generate before you can enter the jhanas. It's not, the state I'm looking for is not the same as what's described in the Visuddhimagga. That's a much deeper state of concentration. But it's a good phrase to use to describe what you've got to do to have a chance to enter the jhanas as described in the suttas. So give you the basic instructions, and then we can see if there are any questions, and maybe we'll have a chance to play with them a little bit. So sit in a comfortable upright posture. It needs to be relatively comfortable, because if it's uncomfortable, that's going to generate aversion, and aversion is one of the hindrances, right? So, yeah, it can't be too comfortable though, because that will generate sleep, and that's another hindrance. So you want a comfortable upright posture, and you want it upright because that just makes everything go easier. It helps keep you awake, and if you're using mindfulness of breathing, it's just going to make the breathing go much, much easier. And so once you're settled in, then you put your attention on your meditation object. The Visuddhimagga talks about 30 different possible meditation objects to generate access concentration. I would say the ones that most people work with is mindfulness of breathing. That's the most common. There's metta meditation, although you can use any of the Brahmaviharas. Metta is the one most people are familiar with. A body scan. If you've studied with Goenka, there's a way to do a body scan, and basically scanning your attention through the surface of your body, just noticing any sensations. You're not trying to change anything. This is just about noticing. There are other ways to do a body scan, but a nice slow 35, 40-minute scan on the surface. If you notice something internally, it's okay to notice it, but you're trying to stay mostly on the surface and just notice what's there. That will get you concentrated. Some people have studied with Ajahn Sumedho or some of his students, and he teaches the nada sound. The sound that you can hear when there's no sound. It's the tape hiss in your hearing. Okay, it's just there, and it's louder for some people than for others. I can hear it all the time. That's probably because I spent too much time in noisy computer rooms and with my stereo cranked up too loud back in the day. So at my age, yeah, there's a sound that's always there. The disadvantage of the nada sound is that you're training yourself to hear this sound. I don't want to hear this sound. So yes, I've used it to enter the jhanas, but when I determined that it worked, that was the last time I ever used it. It does get louder when I get concentrated. That's because I'm usually not noticing it. But when I get really concentrated, there's nothing else to distract me. And so it seems to get louder. So sometimes people can find that to be a useful gauge of, concentration. A fifth possibility is a mantra. People who got a mantra back in the day have come to me and asked, well, can you enter the jhanas using a mantra? I vividly remember the first person that asked me, and I said, I suppose so. Mantras are for concentration. And so she went away, and I thought, okay. So I started doing Om Mani Padme Hum. And sure enough, I got concentrated enough to enter the jhanas. And then she comes back and says, yeah, it works. So if you have a mantra, if you are familiar with mantra practice, it's possible to resurrect your mantra and use it. And to do that, you would basically do your mantra until the mantra starts doing you. You do it long enough and it just becomes automatic. You're not thinking the words over and over again. It's just happening. That's a sign of good concentration. If you're using the breath, which, as I said, is the most common way that people generate access concentration, there's a couple of signs that may show up along the way. One, and this one may show up for other methods as well, is you get a diffuse white light appearing. A lot of people say when they start to meditate, it's black, and then they start getting purple blobs, laser light shows, various sorts of visual things going on. Ignore them. They're just a sign that you're beginning to get concentrated. But if you get the diffuse white light, that's a sign you're getting very good concentration. But it's just a sign. The word in Pali that we find in the suttas is nimitta, and it means sign. It means nothing more than if your stomach is growling, it's a sign that you're hungry. So if you get the diffuse white light, then that's a sign your concentration is good. But you don't do anything with the sign. It's just like you're driving into town and there's a sign that says entering Asheville, right? You don't have to get out of your car, uproot the sign, put it in the trunk. You just know where you are, right? So, yeah, if you get the sign of the diffuse white light, then you know you are entering concentration field. That can be very useful. Now, in later Buddhism, and particularly in the Visuddhimagga, nimitta takes on a specific sign or specific set of signs, a circle of light being the most common circle of white light, sort of like the moon, just bright white light. This is the same phenomena, only getting much stronger. When you get concentrated, it's not that your brain shuts down. There's still neurons firing in your brain, but the firings become more random throughout your brain. And if you get a lot of random firings in your visual cortex, you will see those random firings as a diffuse white light. If you get sufficiently concentrated, the random firings become proportional to the density of the neurons in any particular part of your brain. And in your visual cortex, in the center, there's a circle of densely packed neurons. That's why when you look at something, your peripheral vision's kind of fuzzy, but you can see clearly in front of you. That's those densely packed neurons in the center. Well, you get random firings in that, and it kind of overwhelms the other random firings, and you get a circle of light, which is useful for entering the jhanas as described in the Visuddhimagga. Well, the suttas never mention of this, not even the diffuse white light. But it is a good sign. So if you're sitting there meditating, following your breathing, maybe not works with metta because metta is a little too busy with the phrases or the visualization or whatever. Probably not with a mantra. It might work with the nada sound. Probably won't work with the body scan because that's a little too busy. But if you do get the diffuse white light, it just means your concentration's quite good. If you're working with your breathing and the breathing begins to get shallow, that's a sign of good concentration. If the breathing disappears completely, that's a sign of very good concentration, although that may be a little bit disturbing. Okay, you probably haven't stopped breathing. You're not going to die. But yeah, your body knows what to do. I mean, just looking at all of you have survived multiple decades with your body handling most of the breathing. I mean, what percentage of the breaths you've taken in your life have been under your conscious control? 1%, 2%. Yeah. So your body knows what to do. And if your body gets quiet, it doesn't need as much oxygen. You're not thinking, you're not getting distracted. You're just noticing your breathing and you're not moving. So you don't need much oxygen. So your breathing slows down. There's a real temptation, if you notice your breathing slowing down, to take a nice deep breath. This is exactly the wrong thing to do. The onset of the first jhana appears to be correlated with either an increase in carbon dioxide in your bloodstream or a decrease in oxygen, or probably both. We don't know for certain which it is, but it does seem to be the case. And if you take a nice deep breath to get the breathing going again, you just took yourself away from one of the things you need to create, manufacture, to take you into the first jhana. Okay, so you sit down, you get yourself comfortable, you put your attention on your meditation object. After a while, you get distracted. I would say label the distraction, and then very important, relax and come back to your meditation object. Labeling the distraction has two functions. It disidentifies you with the distraction. Label the distraction. That will help you disidentify with it. The other thing that helps with the labeling is you get some insight into where your mind has a tendency to go. Does it go to the past or the future? Wanting, aversion. Past and future. Notice how seldom you get distracted into the present. Isn't that kind of weird, since that's all we have? Okay, so if you get distracted, label the distraction, and then very important, relax. Bring your attention back to your meditation object. The relax is quite good because most distractions are going to generate at least a minimal amount of tension somewhere. You want something, you're averse to something, okay? So just think to yourself, relax. Maybe take a little bit deeper breath and just relax as you let the energy out. And then go back, if you're using the breathing, to just noticing the uncontrolled breath, the natural breathing. You don't want to intentionally breathe. It makes it easy to stay with the breathing if you're controlling it, but it won't get you the concentration necessary. So you're just observing. You're just resting in observing what's going on if you're using the breath. And then maybe one of the signs shows up or maybe not. Access concentration is being fully with the object of meditation. And if there are thoughts, they're wispy and in the background and not pulling you off into distraction. They might be something like, oh, this is good. Is this what he was talking about? How long have I been here? How long should I stay? As opposed to when I get to Hawaii, the first thing I'm going to do is, or whatever, right? So how long to stay at access concentration once you realize you've gotten there? They say 5 to 10 to 15 minutes, which is, of course, not very definite. That's because once you get to access concentration, your sense of time is going to be distorted. You don't have anything to basically tell what the passage of time is. So just hang out there for a while. If you have been at access concentration long enough, 5 to 10 to 15 minutes, or the breath has gotten so subtle that you can't work with it as a meditation object, then there's a trick. The trick is to drop the attention on the meditation object that got you there and shift your attention to a pleasant sensation. Now you might be wondering, what pleasant sensation? Well, if you look at a Buddha statue, you notice the Buddha's always smiling. You know, that wispy Buddha smile. That's not there just for aesthetic purposes. It's actually a teaching. If you can smile when you meditate and you're following your breath at your nostrils, you just shift your attention 1 inch and notice the pleasantness of the smile. and focus on the pleasantness of the experience. Now, I tell people to use the smile, and if the smile works, it works really well. Unfortunately, it seems to only work for about 20% of the students that I teach this to. Too many people in this culture have been told, smile, whether you feel like it or not. And so now there's an old white guy saying, smile, whether you feel like it or not. Yeah. So you're going to have to find some pleasant sensation. The one that's most common is the hands, sort of a warm, tingly glow in the hands. So you drop your attention on your breath or your metta or whatever, and put your attention to the warm, tingly glow in your hands. If you're doing metta, most likely you'll find the pleasant sensation in the heart center. Yeah, it's a nice warmth in your heart center. Body scan, it could be anywhere. Hands probably more likely than anywhere else. Mantra, much like the breath. Hands, smile, something like that. But it could be anywhere. It could be the third eye, top of the head, top of the shoulders, soles of the feet. You name a body part. And I have had a student who was able to focus on the pleasant sensation in that body part and ride it into the first jhana. So you've gotten to access concentration. You've stayed at access concentration for a while. You've shifted to a pleasant sensation. Now comes the really difficult part. Do nothing else but enjoy the pleasantness of the pleasant sensation. We have to become human beings as opposed to human doings. Anything you do at this point is going to mess it up. You just remain focused on the pleasantness of the pleasant sensation. That's it. If you can do so, eventually the intensity level of the pleasant sensation will increase slightly. Not right away and not by much, but then it'll increase again and again until it suddenly erupts into, well, the Pali words are Pīti and Sukha. Pīti, you see that translated as rapture, euphoria, ecstasy, delight. I like glee. It's got a physical component to it. It's energetic and it's pleasant, hopefully. It's pleasant because it's accompanied by sukha, the opposite of dukkha, which is an emotional state of happiness or joy. You can't really tell them apart in the first jhana. It's Pīti-sukha, all one word. But you have this sudden onrush of experience that is physical and emotionally exciting. The physical is uplifting, may make you sit up really straight, may make you vibrate. It may not show up as vibration, but as heat, like a hot flash. And there's just a strong sense of happiness or joy. You will automatically focus on it. So the instructions are pretty simple. Sit down, get yourself settled, put your attention on your meditation object. If you get distracted, label the distraction, relax, come back until you're no longer getting distracted. Stay there in the non-distracted state for a bit, find a pleasant sensation, focus on it, do nothing else. The jhana comes and finds you. We talk about doing the jhanas, but that's not right. What you can do is set up these conditions for the jhana to arise, and then you just have to sit back and wait for the jhana to show up, which it may or may not do, depending on the level of your concentration, depending on, well, how easily can you stay with a subtle, pleasant sensation? I mean, the breath, that comes in, it goes out, comes in again, goes out. Pleasant sensation, yeah, just sitting there being mildly pleasant. It's more subtle. So you're going to need good access concentration to be able to stay with the more subtle object. That's why it's important to generate access concentration before you switch to the pleasant sensation. The most common problem I find among students is what I call jumping too soon. I followed 3 breaths in a row and there was a pleasant sensation and I jumped on it. No. Finding the pleasant sensation should only be done after you're well concentrated. A pleasant sensation may show up before that. Okay, fine, leave it there. It'll probably still be there once you're concentrated, but you've definitely got to get the concentration or you're just not going to trigger the jhana. What we're trying to do is set up a positive feedback loop. If this was a microphone and I held it up to the speaker, it would make that horrible noise, right? The ambient noise in the room goes into the microphone, goes through the amplifier, comes out of the speaker louder, goes back into the microphone, gets amplified some more, comes out louder still. This is a positive feedback loop of noise. What you're trying to generate is a positive feedback loop of pleasure. When you focus on the pleasant sensation and can just enjoy the fact that it's pleasant, well, that's pleasant, which adds a little more pleasant to the experience. Well, adding a little more pleasant to the experience is also pleasant, which adds a little bit more. And that's even more pleasant. Okay, you get the picture? So you're building this positive feedback loop of pleasure. That's why you need to be well concentrated, because if you are not really steady, it doesn't work. If you have the microphone and you hold it up to the speaker and pull it away, hold it up, pull it away, you don't get the noise, right? It just doesn't work. If you hold your mind up to a pleasant sensation and then pull it away to distraction, it's not going to work. It's got to be held really steady. So jumping too soon is one of the problems. You're going to need good concentration so you don't get distracted when you're focused on the pleasant sensation. Another frequent problem, trying to make something happen. You got a pleasant sensation, nothing's happening. You start commenting. He said something was going to happen, nothing's happening. Well, that's the distraction. That's going to prevent it from happening. Or maybe you try and help it. You don't know how to help it. Anything you do is just going to make it go away. Or maybe it starts to increase and you're like, oh, it's increasing, which makes it go away. Or maybe you're just really good and it increases and you're letting it increase until it feels like it's going out of control and you panic because it's going out of control. Yes, it's going out of control. That's because you can't enter the jhanas and stay in control. You have to let go into the experience. Yeah. My teacher Ayakema said, letting go is the whole of the spiritual path. So yeah, you have to let go into the experience of your pleasure going out of control. It's safe. If it was dangerous, I'd be dead by now. The Buddha recommended the first jhana over and over again. He was kind of compassionate to the people he was teaching. So it's safe enough. What usually happens for someone who finds that it's starting to go, it's just unintentional. They pull back. Unintentionally pull back. And so what I tell them is, okay, just keep doing that. And each time you'll let it go a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further. And then suddenly one time you'll let it go all the way and you'll see that it's no problem. So it sort of fixes itself over time, although it slows down the entry into the first jhana for the first time. When the jhana comes on, it could be very intense, like blowing the top of your head off, or it could be rather mild, or anywhere in between. The length of time you want to stay in the first jhana is inversely proportional to the intensity of the experience. If it's very intense, you might not stay there in it for more than 20 or 30 seconds. If it's mild, you could stay up to 10 minutes. I think beyond 10 minutes is not useful. If it's kind of okay, maybe you stay 5 minutes. When you've had enough or you've stayed the 5 or 10 minutes, the trick to move on is to take a deep breath and really let the energy out. And then focus on the sukha, the happiness, the emotional, pleasant state. We're trying to do a foreground piti, background sukha shift. So you take the breath. Remember I said oxygen or decreasing the carbon dioxide will make the piti go away. We are trying to get there. Okay, when you want to get away from there, take the breath, and it calms the piti. It calms the sukha a little bit, but you can now distinguish the sukha, and you put your attention on the pleasant emotional state and focus on that, and that'll take you towards the second jhana. But the first jhana is what most people start with. Some people, particularly if they're doing metta, might wind up in the second jhana, not get so much piti and get more of the sukha and wind up in second jhana. The second jhana is sukha with background piti. The first jhana is piti with background sukha. But doesn't matter. I mean, the purpose of the first jhana is to get you to the second. So if you go into the second, it's a little harder. It's like starting your manual transmission car in second gear. It helps if you're on a slope. Well, the slope for starting at a jhana other than the first is good concentration. If you're concentrated enough, you should be able to go into any jhana just on its own. Just step in. This is after probably years of practice. You could think of trying to enter the jhanas as, well, let's say your mind is a bowl of water, a pond, let's say. And normally there's lots of waves in this pond, and you're getting concentrated and the waves chill out and it's very subtle. And then you drop in a pebble of pleasure and the ripples go out to the sides of your skull and they bounce off, and when they come back, they reinforce. But because it's not a physical system, if you don't disturb it, they stay reinforced and they bounce again and they do it again. And eventually you get a geyser, and that's the first jhana. Okay. I'm guessing that the piti is dopamine breaking down into norepinephrine, and that the sukha is opioids like serotonin. Now, I'm a retired computer programmer. I'm not a neuroscientist. I did run my theories by a neuroscientist, by Judd Brewer, if you know who that is. And he's like, yeah, could well be. This makes sense. So the focusing on the pleasant sensation is rewarding. The rewarding, I mean, you probably have heard about dopamine. You're scrolling through your whatever, and oh, wow, they liked it. That was the hit of dopamine that you got right there, right? So you liked it. The liking of being on the pleasant sensation is generating dopamine. Dopamine stimulates your nucleus accumbens, the reward center in the center of your brain. And the nucleus accumbens is known to pump out opioids like serotonin. And so I'm guessing that's what's happening. The dopamine breaks down into norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is associated with movement and heat. So the vibration that I get in the first jhana, or the heat that some people get in the first jhana, that's the norepinephrine. So basically what you're trying to do is set up a feedback loop of pleasure that generates dopamine, which will break down into norepinephrine, but the dopamine will also stimulate your nucleus accumbens and generate opioids, particularly serotonin. Everything you experience is neurotransmitters. Everything. Okay, that's how our brains work. And so, what you're doing is playing with neurotransmitters and putting yourself into an altered state of consciousness. Now, the first jhana is not going to give you the depth of concentration that's going to be all that helpful for your insight practice. You're probably going to need to move on to at least the second, preferably the third or fourth. And by the time you get to those, you will have very deeply enhanced concentration.